My name is Nina. I'm standing in the grand hallway of my new lake house, the silence around me a stark contrast to the chaos that once filled my life. The walls are freshly painted in warm, inviting colors, and the sunlight filters through the large windows, casting a soft glow on the polished wooden floors. It's hard to believe that this beautiful place is mine, especially after everything I've been through. I remember the day my life changed forever. It was Christmas Eve, and I was sitting at the dining table with my parents and my grandmother, Amelia. The room was filled with the warm smell of roasted turkey and pine, and my parents were laughing and pouring wine, pretending to be the perfect family. I sat quietly at the end of the table, dreading the inevitable criticism. Then, Amelia put down her fork and looked straight at me with her sharp green eyes. "Nina," she said, her voice clear and steady, "are you still living in the house I bought you?" I froze. The room went dead silent, and the only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. "What house?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw my mother drop her napkin, and my father's face turned pale white. Their smiles vanished instantly, replaced by pure panic. I didn't have a house. I lived in a dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place that should have been condemned years ago. The ceiling leaked, the windows were drafty, and the floorboards were rotted. I worked 2 jobs just to pay the rent, and I ate instant noodles for dinner almost every night. But Amelia didn't know that. She thought she had given me a new start, a chance to build a better life. In that moment, looking at my parents' terrified faces, I realized the truth. They had been lying to her for years, stealing the money she had given them to buy me a house. My mother tried to cover it up, saying that I had decided to rent the house out and was living in a cute little apartment downtown. But Amelia wasn't fooled. She looked at me, waiting for the truth. I took a deep breath and said, "I don't have a house, Grandma. I live in an apartment on Elm Street. The rent is $700 a month, and the heater doesn't work. I take the bus because I had to sell my car." My mother hissed at me, telling me to stop making up stories and ruining Christmas. But I didn't care. I was tired of being their punching bag, tired of living in poverty while they lived in luxury. Amelia stood up, her small frame suddenly looking imposing. "Quiet," she said, her voice like steel. "Nina, get your coat. You're going to show me where you live." My parents tried to stop us, but Amelia wouldn't listen. She was determined to see the truth for herself. We got into her car, a sleek black Mercedes, and drove to my apartment. As we pulled up to the building, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. The front door was propped open with a brick, and there was graffiti on the walls. A group of men stood on the corner, eyeing us suspiciously. Amelia didn't say a word as we walked inside. The hallway smelled of old cigarettes and damp carpet, and the elevator was out of order. We had to walk up 4 flights of stairs, and by the time we reached my door, I was out of breath. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking. Finally, the door creaked open, and I turned on the light. The apartment was freezing, and there was a plastic bucket in the middle of the room catching the water that was dripping from the ceiling. Amelia stepped inside, her eyes wide with shock. She saw the mattress on the floor, the hot plate I used to cook noodles, and the tape holding the glass together on the windowpane. She turned to my parents, who were standing in the doorway, their heads down. "I gave you $500,000 3 years ago," she said, her voice trembling. "I told you to buy Nina a house and set up a trust for her expenses. What did you do with the money?" My father tried to explain, saying that they had invested the money and were waiting for it to grow. But Amelia wasn't buying it. She walked over to the fridge and opened it. It was empty except for a carton of milk and a half-eaten sandwich. "Look at this," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "My granddaughter is starving. She's living in squalor. And you call yourselves parents?" My mother tried to defend herself, saying that they were teaching me character. But Amelia slapped her across the face, the sound echoing in the small room. "You didn't teach her character," she said, her voice cold. You taught her that she's worthless. You watched her suffer and did nothing. You're nothing but thieves. She turned to me and said, "Pack a bag, Nina. You're coming with me." I didn't need to be told twice. I packed my backpack in 2 minutes, and we left the apartment, leaving my parents standing in the cold, moldy room. That night, I slept at Amelia's hotel. It was the best sleep of my life. The sheets were soft, the room was warm, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about the ceiling falling on me. The next morning, Amelia was all business. She was wearing a sharp black suit and looked like the CEO she used to be. "Eat your breakfast, Nina," she said, pointing to a plate of eggs and fruit. "We have an appointment with my attorney at 9 a.m. I was nervous as we drove to the lawyer's office. I had never been in a situation like this before, and I didn't know what to expect. When we arrived, we were ushered into a large conference room. The lawyer, a tall man with gray hair and glasses, shook my hand firmly. "I'm so sorry for what you've been through, Nina," he said. "Your grandmother has filled me in." A few minutes later, my parents walked in. They looked terrible, like they hadn't slept in days. My father had bags under his eyes, and my mother's hair was a mess. The lawyer opened a thick file folder and said, "Let's look at the facts. 3 years ago, Amelia transferred $500,000 to a joint account held by your parents. The memo on the transfer clearly stated, Nina's Housing Trust." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a bank record, showing the transfer of the money. I felt sick to my stomach. $500,000. That could have changed my life. My father tried to lie, saying that the money was still in the account and that they were waiting for me to be mature enough to handle it. But the lawyer wasn't fooled. He pulled out another paper and said, "No, your father doesn't have the money." I had my forensic accountant run a trace on the funds, and it turns out that $485,000 was transferred to a real estate agency 3 days after the money was deposited. My mother let out a small whimper. The lawyer continued, "That real estate agency sold your parents a lake house on Lake Tahoe. They told you it was an investment, but in reality, they were using your inheritance to buy themselves a vacation home." I stared at my parents in disbelief. They had stolen from me, and they had the audacity to lie about it. My father stood up, his face red with anger. "We're her parents," he said. "We have the right to make decisions about her money." The lawyer shook his head. "No, you don't. You took funds entrusted to you for a beneficiary and used them for personal gain. That's embezzlement." My mother started to cry, saying that they were just trying to do what was best for the family. But Amelia wasn't having it. "You sacrificed my granddaughter to save your own egos," she said. "You're nothing but selfish, greedy people." The lawyer then pulled out a new document and said, "Amelia has signed a new estate plan. As of this morning, Nina is the primary beneficiary. She inherits the estate, the real estate holdings, and the trust. And you," he said, looking at my parents, "you get nothing. You're disinherited completely." My parents' faces dropped. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. "You can't do this," my father said. "I'm your son." Amelia looked at him, her eyes cold. "You ceased to be my son when you let your daughter suffer. You broke the trust, and now you have to pay the price." The lawyer then offered my parents a deal. If they signed over the lake house to me, he would drop the criminal charges. My father hesitated, but in the end, he knew he had no choice. He picked up the pen and signed the paper, his hand shaking. As we left the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The battle was over, and I had won. But it wasn't a victory I had expected. I had lost my family, and I had to learn how to live with the pain. Over the next few weeks, my parents tried to fight back. They posted lies about me on social media, trying to ruin my reputation. They even filed an emergency injunction to stop the transfer of the lake house. But it was all in vain. The judge saw through their lies and denied the injunction. The lake house was finally mine. I spent the next few months turning it into a home. I painted the walls, bought new furniture, and created a studio where I could paint. It was a place where I could finally be myself, away from the pain and the lies. Amelia visited me every weekend, and we would sit on the deck, drinking hot cider and watching the sunset. She taught me how to manage my money and how to make smart decisions. She was my rock, my support system. One day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the best of me. I opened it and read the words, "Dear Nina, I'm writing this because I want you to know that we forgive you. We know you were manipulated by the lawyers, and we know you didn't mean to hurt us. We're your parents, and we love you. We're struggling right now, and we could really use your help. Please, be the bigger person and help us out." I laughed out loud. It was a bitter, angry laugh. They forgave me? They had the nerve to ask for my help after what they had done to me? I walked over to the trash can and dropped the letter in. I didn't need their forgiveness, and I certainly didn't need their help. I had made it on my own, and I was stronger because of it. As I stand here in my lake house, looking out at the beautiful view, I realize that I've come a long way. I've learned that true strength comes from within, and that sometimes you have to fight for what's right. I may have lost my family, but I've gained something much more valuable, myself.